Dr. Glaser.
Oh, hey, Kyle. How's it going? Oh, unmute yourself. Click that button on the bottom left corner.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So sorry for the technical difficulties.
Absolutely no worries. It might have been my problem. We were freaking out here a little bit, but I'm glad it's working now, and it's nice to be here with all of you. David Witherspoon.
We're so excited to have you. So,
well,
I'll just give like a brief introduction, if that's okay. Unless Alex, you have something ready? Were you planning on doing it?
Take it away.
Okay. So this is Dr. Glaser. You're not seeing my video because I'm driving, so I'm just on speaker. But this is Dr. Glaser. He is the assistant director of bands at Texas State and all-around general badass. He is how long have you been in Texas State? 8 years?
This is my 7th year.
7 years. Okay, 7 years. And Dr. Glaser, who you're seeing here, is mostly middle school assistant band directors. We have a couple high school folks on here, and everybody that can't be on tonight because they're at a spring concert or teaching a lesson or any other given thing that band directors do will get to catch this via recording. So
Sure.
We are super, super excited to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy life with your wife and your beautiful daughter to speak to us, and we are super excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, it's my pleasure. Again, I'm really sorry that we got off to a late start here.
No worries.
And Hannah is very nice. She said a bunch of nice things. I would like to get badass printed on my business cards, but I don't think the university will allow me to do that. But anyway, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here to chat with you guys. We probably maybe best if we kind of jump right into it since we got a little bit of a late start. I was talking to Christina and Hannah about what would be kind of a good topic to cover tonight, because I think you guys have really kind of discussed a variety of things so far, and it's kind of across the board. And one of the things, I saw Hannah at the wind ensemble concert at Texas State the other day, and I asked her, kind of what would be a good topic and where my head was at. And I was thinking that we talk a little bit about literature selection. And I know you're kind of coming to the end of your cycle right now as far as concerts and whatnot, but I think it's always good to be thinking about what those long-range plans are for your program. And I just want to kind of maybe share some thoughts with you that I go through for that. And then also talk about finding the time to do that, which I think a big thing about this support network that you have is trying to find the balance between doing your job, which seems to take every waking minute, second of your day. And it's difficult to do that and also try to give yourself structure that you have time to kind of decompress. So does that sound like an okay thing, first of all, to talk about with you guys? Awesome. Great. And also, Hannah and Alex, maybe later on, if I sent you some resources, would you be able to forward them on? I have some like PDFs that we want to kind of send off to everyone here. Would that be cool?
1,000,000%. Just shoot them to our email address, and I'll get those posted for our first-year band directors.
Great. This is something, literature selection is something that is kind of really important for me because I think it requires a lot of care. And it's something that I have always kind of nerded out. I got into this field for 2 reasons. One was my high school band director was a real inspiration to me, and I wanted to be like that man. And I combed my hair like him. I wanted to emulate him in every possible way. So he just was an inspiring figure for me. And the other thing was I really enjoyed what I played. My experience, I think, in junior high band and high school band was really outstanding. I had wonderful directors who chose great music. And for me, that was the hook. And I still find myself today always thinking about what would make a great concert experience for my audience, for my students, and for me. And that being the case, I started kind of talking with some friends, and we're doing some professional development sessions, and this one came up, and it's something I'm very passionate about. Again, I'm going to send you guys some links and some things to take a look at later on. But there was a great quote by Bob Reynolds, who was a longtime director at University of Michigan, and he wrote an article for Music Educators Journal, and in it he was talking about the agonizing process of picking new music or picking music for your upcoming year. And you always ask yourself the same questions, like, do you know enough new music? Do you know enough standard literature? When is a long enough time to repeat a piece? What's the strengths and weaknesses of your band? Will you have a good enough oboes to play a piece? Will you have any oboes at all to play a piece? Like, you start asking yourself those questions, and because for us, and for everything that you guys, you said you're pretty much all middle school directors that are on this call right now. Great. For you, after you get done like 6th grade band, when you're using a method book or supplemental materials, for you, literature is your curriculum. Right? You in 7th and 8th grade, like, you're teaching them how to be musicians through the music that you play. And it's really difficult or really easy to fall in the trap of, picking things that are just going to go together easily, and that's your measuring stick, versus the more difficult question of asking yourself, like, how are they going to grow? How are they going to be better? And how are you going to be better? So the acronym that I want you to think about in this whole process now is going to be START. So from start to finish, thinking about programming for band. So S is for student, and that is the thing for us that I think is probably the easiest thing for us as educators to gauge. In other words, what are the strengths of your students? How many scales and major key signatures, minor key signatures can they play? What's their range? What's their rhythmic vocabulary like? Those are things that you will probably assess quickly as they're coming out of 6th grade band. And I'm assuming for most of you, if you taught them in 6th grade as beginners, they're getting ready to go into their first full band experience, like, all the time, consistently throughout the year. So you need to be checking those things off the box. So you're probably keeping detailed records, and that's not going to be a problem for you. T is for teacher, and this is the one that I think where it immediately starts to get more difficult. Taking and assessing what is your teaching ability. I cut my teeth teaching public school band in Pennsylvania. I taught for 10 years. My first 2 years, I was an assistant high school director, and I taught beginning band 2 days a week. I would kind of go up and help those. And I remember those first couple of years, every once in a while, my head director would allow me to do a piece with the wind ensemble. And there were some pieces I really wanted to do. And then I cracked open the score, and I realized that I didn't have enough skill to teach those pieces. And that's a hard pill to swallow. You might look at some literature that's like, you really want to do it and it's fun to listen to, but you might not have the skill set developed quite yet to jump into teaching that piece. And that should be a goal to get there where you're able to do that. And maybe you put that piece on the shelf and you come back to it later on. Other things, to think about with teachers, like, how do you as a teacher want your students to grow? That goes hand in hand with that first point. Like, you're assessing their musical ability and what their rhythmic vocabulary and scale vocabulary is like. But if you play it safe only time and only play the stuff that they can play right now, you're not going to give them the skills to get better. So you have to start making sure that you're able to try to stretch your players. A is for audience. And by the way, are there any questions so far? Like, feel free to jump in or wave if need be. Okay, great. And by the way, I know my camera is shaking. I'm rather animated, and you'll see a blur, and that's just me shaking the camera. So I apologize for inducing vertigo or anything. A is for audience, talking about not necessarily the number of people in your audience, but who you're playing for. So as middle school directors, did you guys all take a band to contest this year? Was that a thing that happened? Okay. So obviously when you do that, if you're going to UIL for a concert and contest, there is a set list that you have to play from. You are limited in what you can choose. Now, it's a wonderful list, but there's a very specific set of criteria that are out there for that. But like, what's the audience going to be? How does your concert differ if it's an audience for like the spring concert or the winter concert, or it's a special event thing in your district, like you're opening a new fine arts building and they want the band to play, or if they do some type of celebratory concert. I think the other thing to think about in that with your audience is what's like for them to sit through a concert, because I don't know what it's like for you, but I remember teaching again in Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania. So I'd have like these coal miners It's like we're the parents. I'm like, okay, Johnny just got off of the shift at the mines where he did 11-hour shift and he's just seeing sunlight for the first time. He's coming. You know, the last place that guy wants to be is at a 3-hour middle school band concert as he hears a whole bunch of like, we have to think about who we're playing for and making sure that we're trying to educate them too, but we don't want to be pandering. We want to make sure that we are trying to allow them to grow, but also give them some things that they can kind of glean onto and grab onto. I used to love concerts with one of my audience members when like that band dad would come up and like, oh man, that piece was awesome. The one that had like all the clangy sounds on it. It was really loud. It was great. Like those things are awesome because your audience members are listening as opposed to them just kind of like checking out and trying to get home to see, you know, what's going to be on America's Next Top Model or whatever they watch. I don't know. So just trying to get them to be invested in the program is really important. R is for rehearsals, and I think this is one that you can easily try to plan out. As teachers in Texas, I'm just speaking in generalities now, and I'm a classic. I was not from Texas, but I got here as quick as I can. As far as what's happening down here, I'm really impressed with the level of music making that's happening and the level of investment that's happening in the kids' part and the director's part. It's really easy to like pick contest music and to not really do a lot of score study in it because you know you're going to have 4.5 months to work on that music. So I think a better approach is to chart out the number of rehearsals that you have and find the 4 or 5 pieces that are going to be in this concert and do some advanced planning and like try to look at your concerts and your rehearsals and be like, we're playing 5 pieces on this. And on a scale of 1 to 10, this piece is the hardest one. That's a 10. And this piece is a 2. It's super easy. And this piece is right in the middle. It's a 5. And you start to kind of figure out, okay, this piece is 8 minutes long. So you come up with your own formulas, which again, I'm going to send you a whole bunch of stuff, but how do you kind of parcel out enough rehearsal time to be successful with that music? And how do you do your score study in advance so that you're not learning on the podium? Like you'll be so much more effective if you go in already making decisions on what you want your band to do, what you want them to sound like, and have a preconceived notion of what the music. I mean, that voice that's in your head that tells you to do bad things, it's the same one that should be like singing all the parts and hearing everything and hearing the harmonies and hearing the direction and the line, and just try to have that internalized before you get there. Okay, let's STA. Our rehearsals. Another thing about rehearsals that you should think about is, where is your help? So what you're doing right now by networking and being with these people are so important, because you might find that one of the other persons on this conference call is doing one of the same pieces that you are. And you can get on the phone with them and be like, hey, like, how did you teach these measures? Or was this easy for you to teach? And you can kind of spitball ideas off of each other. You probably are working in a school where you're not the only director. So if your other directors are like, hey man, I really need to do paperwork this one, like, okay, but can you really help me for at least these 10 minutes here? Like, try to make sure that you are being a good colleague to the people you work with. Try to make sure that they're helping you. So there's a real team approach. How about, are you doing sectionals? What help do you have for sectionals? Are you bringing in people who are experts on their instrument to do good modeling, to give you good ideal images? All the things that we encourage you to do as an educator. I think you need to make sure that the people who are working with your program are trying to do the same thing. And then the other thing is, obviously, talking about rehearsals is like, what equipment do you need? And that's something we take for granted. At the college level, there's lots of times like, I'll look at a piece of music and be like, oh, this piece calls for, 3 marimbas. Well, I'm not going to do that, because at Texas State, it's hard to get 3 marimbas in the same room at the same time because of how large the percussion studio and what stuff is being used. So you just need to kind of do some advanced planning with that. I didn't want to stop at STAR. So I was coming up with cool words. So T stands for totality. So ask yourself, like, what is it? Can someone answer, like, what's a good concert you've been to? Like, what has made a good concert experience for you? Does anybody think back to a concert you went to and you're like, oh man, like this concert was great. I loved it. Like why? Yeah. Ivan?
I think the one that I can remember the most is the way that they program the concert. So it's not like, there's so many like, really technical pieces like back to back. It's like a good ebb and flow of the entire, just going through the emotions of like all of it and from start to finish. And I think it's a really good way of how to program a concert instead of be like, oh, there's like two pieces back to back that are, lyrical pieces.
Yeah, and we're actually going to talk about them. So kind of the flow you're talking about is like the flow of the concert and how things progress from one to another. Yeah, that is super important. Like we're going to talk in a moment specifically about like what piece goes first and how you do that. But that's a great point. I mean, your ears kind of tune out if it's like, oh, there's 3 lyric pieces in a row, or there's, 3 pieces that are all quarter note equals 120 in 4/4 time in a row. It becomes like right now you're all sitting in rooms with lights on and the lights are making a noise right now. It's like white noise. Like you don't hear it because you're so used to it because it's on all the time. So you need to be able to kind of juggle some things up. Awesome. Great. Someone else, Colin, I think you maybe had your hand up with something else that you thought was a good concert experience.
Sorry, I had to find the unmute button. I just think back to a concert experience. It was probably the first concert I got to see my sister perform in the 7th grade, and it was them getting ready for their Midwest Clinic performance. And I got to hear so many different kind of pieces of music that I would have never thought would have been interesting to me, like different genres, different things, and it was all at the very end. It was all music that everybody really could connect with and enjoy. So I think that concert really played to like a lot of people's audiences and emotions.
And the nice thing about those Midwest concerts is they are by design so diverse. I mean, that's wonderful. Like you go to hear a 7th grade band, for as many like hard pieces they need to play an equal amount of easy pieces, and they try to juggle things up because Midwest was a festival or a clinic that was basically founded by music publishing companies, and they wanted to use it as a way to showcase. So it really is coming directly to what we're talking about here right now. So like they want to experience different genres, different styles, and then also for as much old music as there is, half of the program has to be written within the past year. So you get kind of old and new stuff. These are great points. I mean, other things that I think might jump off the page is like just if the band is obviously good, right? I mean, like you remember a great concert experience because you're like, oh my God, that group is just like bonkers good. You go hear Jerry Junkins' group at UT, you're just like, you can't believe the sounds that are coming off the stage. And it's also like, that happens on a junior high level, that happens on a high school level too. And groups sound good when they play music that's appropriate for them. When they play stuff that is like, and I'm not saying that they can't stretch or play difficult pieces. I'm not saying like they played safe. They find ones that work to elevate their program. So I think like what that group sounds like and making sure that they pick music that they're going to be successful on is super important. And kind of Ivan, your or maybe it was, I guess, Colin, actually both of you touched on the fact that like the different styles and how things flowed from one to another is super important. And this will be in the handout I'll give you. My office wall when I taught public school was just a big grid. And in it, I have a bunch of kind of different key elements of music listed. So if you can go through like your standard, the elements of music, we have tonality, like key, rhythm, harmony. You start like kind of filling in gaps. But there's and that's stuff that, as we said earlier, we use to kind of assess how like what students' playing abilities are. I think another important one to think about is kind of this form or genre and musical era genre. So when you think of like styles of pieces, what comes to mind? Or if you think of like band eras, like you think of like band history, like what concert bands, like what comes to mind? Or like how can you delineate like, oh, that's a piece that a band plays? Or like, can you just shout out some types of forms that you think bands are exposed to. So like Sousa marches, right? Like marches is a thing unto itself, and they are not unique to the band, but it's important. And then I think you said like, you know, a slow piece, like a ballad or a tone piece, right? But generally not a lot of technique, pretty slow. Multi-movement works, like playing suites, whether they're like Baroque dance suites or contemporary suites or divertimentos. Who's a really with it right now contemporary band composer that you guys know? Like, what's the name of a composer that would be one that you like their music?
Standridge.
Randall Standridge. Great. Turn out a lot of great educational music for a lot of different levels. That's great. Who else?
Even Bryant.
I saw someone texted in Mackey. I'm not sure who that is, but yes, that's fantastic. John Mackey, Stephen Bryant. There are a bunch of composers out there who are alive and writing music right now for us. Like right now, like today at 8:42 p.m., they are working on band music, which is fantastic. So I think when I'm trying to look at these different kind of categories, you think a slow piece, a march, suites, multi-movement works, something new, contemporary pieces. We could think about your British band stuff. So like your Holsts and your Grangers and your Vaughan Williams if you're teaching high school. You can think of like your 1950s and 1960s era pieces like Persichetti. And those are kind of names that you maybe studied or played when you guys were in college. Because like as all of us as band directors, we have a history, but our history is not as long as our friends in the choral world or the orchestral world, right? I mean, so we have to kind of look like we're looking at a much shorter span of time, really since like the mid 19th century until now, and probably early 20th century until it was like what we know as a concert band. Anyway, to get back to my original point, my whole wall would be a bunch of those different categories. So I would have like things written down the wall like march, tone piece, suite, British band piece, new piece, fun piece, or maybe it's a lighter piece. So maybe you put your Disney medley or your Broadway show tunes thing, or something that's like just really fun, kind of a quirky, the audience would be able to clap along and easily get into this. And I have all those categories. And then what I would start doing would be like, okay, I would start looking at over the summer all the pieces that I was thinking about playing. So I might, on that wall and where I had marches, I would have maybe like 8 index cards up there of pieces that I had listened to that I knew because I played them before, or I was interested in, or I listened to a demo recording. And on the index card on the wall, it would have the name of the piece, and it would have the key that it was in, or the key that it was mostly in, how long it was, if it was like compound, if it was in 6/8 time or 4/4 time. And I would go through and I'd have all those things. And I'm like, okay, I've got to pick my first concert. And I would write like the difficulty on it. Like, oh, this piece is up. This is the hardest march we'll ever play. Or this is a super easy march. It's going together, no problem. So I would take that and I'd take all those index cards. And then I would just go and I'd be like, okay, first concert. I want to open with a flashy concert opener. That was another category. I had an opener / closer category, which is like, what piece is going to punch my audience right in the eyes, just pow, and get them on their feet after the first piece. 3-minute piece by Jack Stamp that was going to be a flashy cenotaph. So lots of percussion and great concert opener or whatever. So I get those things up there, and then I would start putting those index cards together. Okay, I want a march. I want a slow piece. I want a suite. And then I look at the index cards like, oh, I'm not going to do these 2 pieces in the same concert or these 3 in a row because they're all in the key of F. So, okay, I'm going to replace that march with a march that's in B flat, moves to E flat. And I'm going to replace this piece with a piece that's in A minor. And you start shifting things around. So in other words, all those elements that we talked about earlier, when you look at like meter and time signature, you're keeping track of all that some way. Now, I was born the wrong decade, and I'm old school, like pieces of paper and pencil. I mean, just keep a file on your computer, do a little sticky notes on your computer, keep an Excel spreadsheet, and keep track of that stuff, and become a list nut and save all that stuff. And then you'll be able to have it down the road to reference. Again, this is going to be one of the things I'm going to send you. There's this wonderful clinic from Midwest in 2012 or 13 by Travis Cross, who's the director of bands at UCLA, and he gave a session on this. And it was this thing. He has this nice little PDF packet that you can have that kind of goes through, and it gives you a bunch of these categories, and it gives you a way to kind of look at the year and kind of figure out, okay, if you have 4 concerts a year, how you're going to spread all that music out. And the other thing I think you guys should be doing is keeping track of what you're playing for several reasons. One, you keep track of what you play, and you just do it in like a spreadsheet or a database program, so that when at some point, if you go looking for another job, you can have your little book that shows all the cool things that you've done. And here's a list of all the conducted repertoire that you've done. I mean, I kind of landed, I think, the job I have at Texas State because I had a pretty extensive opportunities conducting a lot of good literature. And I was able to show them from past concert programs. And the other thing is, I think that if you're all teaching middle school right now, but if you end up teaching high school, that's where you end up. If you're a high school band director, if a kid comes into your program as a freshman and leaves as a senior, and they've never played a British band piece by Holst, Vaughan Williams, or Granger, I think you maybe need to reassess the literature that it's important that those students are exposed to that literature when they're in high school, because first of all, they can play an awful lot of that stuff. And secondly, it's your job to make sure that music survives. A lot of that's kind of core rep for us. Like, will pieces that are written right now be around 20 years from now? I don't know. That's up to you. That's up to you to make sure that you play them 5 years from now, 10 years. A lot of times we get a piece of music and we play it and like, that's great. And then we throw it away and we forget about it and we never come back to it. So like right now at Texas State, I do the second band. I hate saying that because they're awesome and they're great. But
hey, Dr. Glaser.
Yes.
Hey, I'm loving this. I just want to let you know you're at like 30 or 35-ish minutes. So I just wanted to let you know where we were at on time.
That's great. I'm going to close this up, and then I can answer some questions. We can talk about some other things.
Great.
But I keep track of what I'm doing because I need to start repeating that music. And the kind of last thing I want to talk about this is trying to get in on writing new music. Maybe right now you're at a school where you don't have great instrumentation, and maybe it's not so. Maybe it's hard to find new music that will fit your band. You know what you guys can do? You could all go in together and have someone write a piece of music for your group. And maybe you don't have a huge budget to do that. Do you know who would love the opportunity to write a piece for a middle school band, like a short opener? A master's or a doctoral composition student someplace. Like they want to get their music played. So I bet you guys can all go together. Everyone's in here and everyone's like, hey, can we all take $50 out of our budget? And you get, 10 schools, and you got a nice little chunk of change that you can have. You can go to a person like, can you write a, 2-minute middle school concert fanfare, something new to start with? And that could be something that this group could do. And you could contribute to new music right now. You don't need to go and find Donald Grantham or John Mackey to write a piece. Like that's going to be way too expensive for you. So you need to help supporting music and help each other. So I think that's just some things you can think about. Last thing about this before I kick it open for questions is don't be overwhelmed by this. There is a lot of music out there, and it's really easy to kind of just all of a sudden be overwhelmed by the amount of good music. Colin, you were talking about Midwest. Like, go to clinics, go to TMEA, save all the concert programs. Just start an iTunes playlist and start throwing music in it that you think you're interested in. Start writing that down. That way you won't forget it, and help each other. Like if you took, in the summer break, if you took 1 hour or 2 30-minute sessions to get a new demo recording, or go online and listen to a couple new pieces and make some notes, you'll be better armed, so you're not coming back at the end of the summer and frantically picking music. I listen to music in the car all the time, and I make a little note to myself. Like I put my iPod on shuffle, and I just go through, and I have a whole bunch of band music downloaded, like thousands of tunes that I've forgotten about. And I'll just go through and I'll just make a note to myself, like, oh, I got to play this piece, and then I know it. But I mean, like, if you just kind of keep it in your brain and don't write stuff down, you'll lose it. So it's important you try to document that stuff. Whew. I have been talking at you now apparently for a lot. So what questions do you guys have for me about this?
My first question is, why do you still have an iPod?
Actually, yeah, that's true. I do have an iPod. Actually, I guess I'm using my phone. So I spoke out of turn. I told you I'm vintage. I don't prefer. I'm not old. Experienced or seasoned.
Okay, I'll leave the questions to our first year teachers. If y'all want to do the awkward hand raise, and either Dr. Glaser or Alex can help call on people so that I don't endanger the humans around me.
This is easy.
I have a question, if
yes.
nobody else does, to kind of kick it off. If we're teaching middle school band, like, I love the idea of getting a historic piece in there, but I always shy away from it because I don't know who the heck wrote for middle school band that's not writing right now. You know, like the older stuff, I feel like it's very difficult to suit for middle school band. Are there any composers or pieces that come to mind when you think like, oh, my middle school band should definitely be playing so-and-so's music to get like that historic aspect of it?
That's a great question. And, you know, I think the nice thing is, like, the younger the grade levels that you teach, the kind of like blurrier the lines become. I mean, I think, you know, if you're teaching like at the college or high school level, you have to be very careful what you think. But if you're teaching like beginning band, like, to say like, oh, we're going to do like in sixth grade band themes from Beethoven's ninth symphony, which is like Ode to Joy, right? You know, like, that's fine to play. Like, that is absolutely fine to play. Now, you're not going to do, like, you probably wouldn't be doing an arrangement of Beethoven's ninth with a high school band, because even while I'm not saying Beethoven is bad music, it's obviously wonderful music, but there's appropriate music that's written for band. And I think also it's probably harder to find certain things that are out there that check off some of those categories from the historical perspective for junior high groups. That being said, there's lots of times you can find, and I won't be able to spout off like the arrangers for you now, but there are people who do lots of wonderful arrangements of kind of and junior high accessible pieces. Like, there's a wonderful arrangement of Horkstowe Grange, a second movement from Lincolnshire Posy,
Really?
that is arranged by Mike Sweeney, and it's in wonderful key, and it sounds glorious. It's really fantastic. There's other things that are out there that, you know, I think Timothy Broge, like, you can go on Manhattan Beach website, and there's a lot of Renaissance music that's written out there that Timothy Broge and I'm blanking on the name. Timothy Broge and not Kelly, it's going to come to me. But anyway, there's lots of Renaissance music that's out there for junior high, that's playable like for junior highs, like Soldier's Procession and Sword Dance, the Battle Pavane. There's all these great pieces that like is music from the 15 and 1600s that's out there. I think the other thing is, and that's one of the resources I'm going to go through, is like, right now people are talking about what's happening right now, which makes sense. I think what we do to make sure you find those pieces is we look at old lists and we look at old references and old resources. So, you know, you can easily go on and do a web search and try to find like, what are the top 50 band pieces? And there's some like college dissertations that are out there and stuff like that. But you can find from people's lists of what music they think is important, and you find that list from the 80s and see what people said. Now, some of that stuff has stood the test of time, and some of it has not. I mean, like, who are your kind of like 1980s composers, like Anne McGinty? I mean, she's still writing, but like, Anne McGinty was kind of like the go-to junior high band person for a real long time. you know, and like her music is great. And I think, you know, it's important every once in a while we still play an Anne McGinty piece if you like it. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Alex.
Just to piggyback, like we do an easy arrangement of Shepherd's Hay. I can't tell you who it's by, but it's, you know, great music, Shepherd's Hay, and it's introducing them to Granger, and the kids like it. But and there's a lot of arrangements like that. Country Gardens, we do a solo for Country Gardens, but sometimes middle school arrangements sound interesting. And it's not like, I wonder if there are any arrangements, or can you warn any arrangements that, like, let's say a kid listened to Country Gardens arrangement but it's so bad it does the piece a disservice, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
warn against anything like that. It doesn't have to be Granger or an arrangement. Like, what would you warn against, or maybe stay away from for certain pieces?
right. And again, I think, you know, like the younger grade levels that you're doing, or maybe if you're responsible for teaching the less experienced bands, like sometimes you might have to pick a piece that's not being maybe as true to the original intent because, hey, my kids have this limited range, or this, you know, they can't play in this register, or they don't have this rhythmic vocabulary yet, kind of things we were talking about earlier. One of the lists that I'm going to send you is kind of like basically questions you should ask yourself when you're looking at a piece of music. And I think when you're looking at something that's like an arrangement or like a transcription, you know, is the essence of the original piece preserved? You know, I always ask myself, if the composer was in the room and he's like, yeah, these are middle school kids, so this is not like you wrote this for, you know, professionals, but these are middle school kids who've been playing for, like, would you be happy that they are playing your music and trying to kind of do due diligence and support your music? And if I thought that composer would say yes, I'd be like, okay, you know, I'd go for it. There's some pieces for like that are transcriptions that I don't think would work for band. Like, you know, there's an arrangement out there of, I mean, I don't, Adagio for strings by Samuel Barber, the beautiful piece, which then he transcribed for chorus that Barber did himself. There's a band transcription of that. Like, I don't think that works well. So like for me, I'm not going to pick that piece because I don't think that preserves the essence of that piece. And you need to also, Alex, maybe check off those other things we're talking about, because sometimes things don't transfer well. If it's a transcription, like, oh, the strings, like they might not be able to, clarinets can't be a violin section. They, you know, they need to breathe. They can't do some of the things that strings can do. So I think you try to check those musical elements, and are they able to check it off adequately or not. Anything else? I'm going to send you guys a bunch of stuff. Hey, there was some things going on in the chat. I'm not sure if this is, oh yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. Yes, Brian. Oh, Jack. Hey, Jack Wilds teaches with me. Someone said that on the chat thing. Yeah, like Jack Wilds is on faculty at Texas State. I bet you, talking about like trying to commission a new piece. I mean, I bet you guys, if you wrote to him and could come up with something together, like this group of people could do that with your schools, that'd be a real nice thing. Or he might be able to point you in the way of someone who would be willing to do that as well. Might be able to help you out. So, or, you know, and maybe you don't have, another thing about new music is maybe it's not even a full piece. Maybe you have them write warm-ups for you. Like and that could be a whole thing. Like, what resources are you using? Like, maybe you need to have some warm-ups written for teaching compound meter. I don't know. Just spitball on here. So
I love that idea so much. Like having a piece, you know, commissioned by our group.
The school district that I taught at in East Roswell, we commissioned 2 new pieces every year. So 2 new band pieces just by the school district, and there was 2 because there was a North District and a South District. So I was at the South District, and we brought the composer in, and they did a residency for like 4 days, and then there was a concert at the end of those 4 days where each band in the district played 2 pieces, and if that composer wrote a piece for that grade level, we would do one of their pieces. And if the composer was a conductor and wanted to conduct that piece, we allowed them to do that. So like I would conduct the piece with my band and the composer would conduct his or her piece with my band. And we would start with the little kid bands, and we would work our way up to the high school band. And like, it was amazing how band kids were like, composers are alive. Like, they had no idea. Like, they thought, well, they're all dead people, obviously. Like, it was a wonderful collaborative experience. And don't be scared of it. Just pick up the phone, like, be polite and write a nice email. I'm sure you guys have probably even here talked about how do we like maintain professional decorum with people. Like, this is awesome that we're just sitting here kind of shooting ideas back and forth. But and you sit down and like, I really like Jack Wild's music, and you sit down and you type up an email to him, and you approach him about the possibility, and would you be interested in running a piece, and when does he have availability, and you just start the discussion. Like, it's cool to ask those questions. Composers want to hear from you. So if you have someone that you love and you play their music, send them an email and let them know that. I bet you they'll remember that then if 6 months or a year later, you're emailing them again to say, I did these pieces of yours. We love your music and we want to play your music again. Or we want you to write a new piece for us. Some things I'm going to send you. I'm going to send you that Midwest packet, which is about programming. I'm going to send you kind of a little handout that I gave when I did this professional development session someplace else. I'm going to send you some lists, some new and old lists, some pieces that I think, a list of some pieces that I think are good pieces that you should listen to. I'm going to send you, I have a couple handouts from like other like leaders in our field, like Mallory Thompson and Dennis Glock at Penn State and Bob Reynolds, who was at Michigan, and some other college band directors. I'm going to send you lists of pieces that they think are good pieces, and they include junior high pieces on their list as well. And I think you just go down that list and like, oh, I don't know that piece, I'm going to listen to it and see what you think. I think that's a good way to kind of make sure that you're being exposed to good literature. Okay. Cool. Hi, Hannah. Hopefully you're not still driving.
No, I just got home.
All right. Cool. Anything else?
This is wonderful. This is like a really good thing that we can take into summer and actually do some fun with band and doesn't feel like work, because I think most of us are band directors because we love music and we love listening to and playing music, and this is a fun way to be able to take that, like the whimsical part, the fun part of band, into the summer and actually feel energized while still working, you know.
Right.
So I love that you wanted to talk about this tonight. Would you guys prefer those documents from Dr. Glaser in the Facebook group, or would you like me to send it to everybody via email? 1 for email, 2 for Facebook group. Hand on your face if you don't know. Okay, super helpful. I'll email it to you because that's easier for me. So there's that.
Great. I'll send you that stuff. And if you don't mind, Hannah, if I think of this, anything else along these lines, like, I'm still doing study and research on this as well. So if it's okay with all you guys, I'd like to maybe continue every once in a while, send you something, and I can send it to you, and then you can disseminate to the rest of the group. Just, I will probably inundate you with some extra handouts and things that I think it's always good just to hang on to. Okay.
Oh, resources. It's the word.
Fabulous. Yes. Great.
Awesome. Well, we cannot thank you enough for being here. I know a lot of people had spring concerts tonight. They'll be catching the recording this week. But we really, really appreciate your time and your wisdom and humor and just you in general. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak with us and teach us. And we're really, really blessed to know you. So thank you so much.
No problem. And I'm so sorry that it got off to a late start. But you guys, hey, enjoy your last, 14 days of school. You got to be towards the end, right? You're almost there. My wife teaches middle school band, so she's like, 14 days? Like, yeah, we're planning trips. So yeah, you guys are doing great. I'm glad you're doing this. This is a great thing. It's nice to have friends and help and be able to kind of link arms together and know that you got this. So keep it up. Okay, this is great.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dr. Glaser. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great night and a great week, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, see y'all.